The galaxy had a name for humanity. They called them the quiet species. For 300 years, humans had spread across the stars. They built colonies on 40 worlds. They traded with alien empires. They smiled at insults and walked away from fights. The great powers of the Orion Arm watched these strange creatures from Earth and laughed at them. The Dominion controlled 2,000 star systems. Their warships darkened the skies of conquered worlds. Their soldiers had crushed 100 species into slavery. When they looked at humanity, they saw only weakness. "They have no warrior spirit," Admiral said to his war council. He was tall, even for his skin was covered in battle scars. His 4 eyes burned with contempt. "They run from every conflict. They bow to every demand. They are prey animals pretending to be people." The council laughed. They had gathered on the bridge of the flagship Eternal Dominion to discuss the expansion of their territory. 3 human colonies sat on their border, rich worlds, fertile worlds, worlds that the wanted. "Send them a message," the High Emperor had ordered. "Tell them to surrender those colonies. If they refuse, take everything." Admiral had smiled when he received those orders. This would be easy. This would be fun. On Earth, the United Terran Council received the demands. They gathered in the great chamber beneath the Alps, where humanity's leaders had met for 2 centuries. President Wei read the message aloud. The wanted 3 colonies. 12 million humans would become property of the Dominion. They had 30 days to comply. "They cannot be serious," Ambassador said. She had spent 20 years negotiating with alien powers. She had never seen demands this extreme. "They are completely serious," General replied. He was old now, his hair white, but his eyes were still sharp. "They have done this before. They did it to the Hollow people. They take what they want because no one stops them." President looked at the faces around the table. Fear, anger, uncertainty. Humanity had worked so hard to avoid war. They had swallowed their pride 1,000 times. They had accepted unfair trade deals and minor insults because peace was more valuable than pride. But this was different. This was not an insult. This was the enslavement of 12 million people. "We will refuse," the president said quietly, "but we will do it politely. We will offer them trade agreements instead. Perhaps they will accept a compromise." General shook his head. "They will not accept. They smell blood. They think we are weak." "Then we will show them we are not weak." "And if they attack?" The president was silent for a long moment. Then she pressed a button on her console. A hologram appeared above the table. It showed a network of hidden facilities spread across human space. Secret shipyards, weapon factories, training bases. For 200 years, humanity had prepared for this moment. They had built an invisible military machine, hidden from the eyes of the galaxy. "If they attack," the president said, "we will show them what quiet really means." The received humanity's refusal. As General had predicted, they did not accept the compromise. Admiral called it an insult. The High Emperor called it rebellion. The War Council called it an opportunity. "They have 40 colonies," Admiral announced. "We have 2,000 systems. Their largest fleet is 50 ships. We have 10,000 warships. This will not be a war. This will be a hunt." The other great powers of the galaxy watched with interest. The hegemony secretly sent intelligence about human defenses to the. They hoped both sides would weaken each other, leaving scraps for the to claim. The syndicate of placed bets on how long humanity would last. Most said 3 months. Some said 3 weeks. No one said humanity would win. The ascended throne of the oldest and proudest empire in the galaxy issued a statement. The humans were foolish to refuse. They should have surrendered with dignity. Now they will be erased with none. On the human colony of New Geneva, life continued as normal. Children went to school. Workers went to their jobs. Families ate dinner together and talked about ordinary things. They knew about the demands. They knew war might be coming. But they trusted Earth to protect them. They trusted their leaders to find a solution. Governor Sarah, no relation to the president, received updates every hour. The negotiations had failed. They were mobilizing. A fleet was being assembled. She tried to prepare her people, but what could she say? How do you prepare 12 million people for the possibility of enslavement? We should evacuate, her advisor suggested. Get as many people off-world as possible. Where would they go? The governor asked. They will claim any world we send them to. Running will not save them. Nothing will save them except Earth. She looked out her window at the capital city of New Geneva. 2 million people lived in that city. They had built it from nothing over 3 generations. They had turned a barren rock into a garden world. They had schools and hospitals and parks where children played. They had lives. They had futures. The governor closed her eyes and prayed to whatever gods might be listening. She prayed that Earth would find a way. She prayed that they would change their minds. She prayed for a miracle. In the dark of space, 200 warships entered the 442 system. They moved slowly, confidently. They had done this many times before. They knew exactly how this would end. Admiral stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion and looked at the blue-green world ahead. New Geneva, such a small prize, such easy prey. Open a channel, he commanded. Let them hear their fate. The communication officer obeyed. Across New Geneva, every screen and speaker activated. Every human heard the same message. Admiral's face appeared before them, cold and cruel. People of New Geneva, he said, your leaders have refused our generous offer. They have chosen war instead of peace. They have chosen death instead of life, but we are merciful. We give you one final chance. Surrender now and you will serve the Dominion as workers. Refuse and you will serve as examples. He paused, he smiled. You have 1 hour. Governor Sarah watched the message with her council. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was pounding. 1 hour. 1 hour to decide the fate of 12 million people. Contact Earth, she said. Tell them we need help. Tell them we need it now. The message went out at the speed of light, but Earth was far away. Help would not arrive in time. Nothing would arrive in time. The clock began to count down. 1 hour, 59 minutes, 58. The quiet species was about to learn that sometimes being quiet was not enough. The hour passed in silence. Governor Sarah tried everything. She sent messages to Earth. She tried to negotiate with Admiral. She begged for more time. The Admiral listened to her pleas and laughed. Your time is up, he said when the clock reached 0. You had your chance. Governor was still speaking when the first missiles fell. She was in the middle of a sentence, offering trade rights, offering resources, offering anything that might save her people. The explosion cut her off. The communication screen went dark. The building shook. Outside, the sky turned to fire. They did not attack military targets. They did not strike government buildings or defense stations. They chose the heart of the capital city where the most people lived, schools, hospitals, apartment buildings, shopping centers. They wanted to send a message. They wanted to show the galaxy what happened to species that refused them. The bombardment lasted 6 minutes. When it stopped, 1.2 million humans were dead. The survivors crawled from the ruins. They were covered in dust and blood. They searched for family members who would never answer. They screamed names into the smoke and silence. Children wandered alone through streets that no longer existed. Parents dug through rubble with their bare hands, looking for small bodies. Admiral watched the destruction from orbit and smiled. This was how you taught a lesson. This was how you broke a species. Send landing parties, he commanded. Begin collection of the survivors. The Dominion needs workers. Soldiers descended on New Geneva. They moved through the ruined city with weapons ready, gathering humans like cattle. Anyone who resisted was killed. Anyone who ran was killed. Anyone who looked at a soldier the wrong way was killed. Governor survived. She had been in a bunker when the bombardment began. She emerged to find her world destroyed. Her city was gone. Her people were being herded into transport ships. Her government was dead. An officer found her standing in the ruins of her office. He recognized her from the communication broadcasts. He laughed. "The governor," he said, "you should have surrendered. This is your fault. All of this is your fault." He put a collar around her neck. It was a slave collar, the kind they used on conquered species. It would shock her if she disobeyed. It would track her location at all times. It would remind her, every second of every day, that she was no longer free. "Take her to the flagship," the officer ordered. "Admiral wants to meet the leader of these quiet humans." On Earth, the news arrived like a thunderbolt. The Terran Council watched the footage in horror. They saw the bombardment. They saw the death toll. They saw their people being collected like animals. President Wei had not slept in 3 days. She had tried so hard to prevent this. She had offered everything short of surrender. And now 1.2 million of her people were dead, and millions more were being enslaved. "What do we do?" Ambassador asked. Her voice was hollow. Her face was pale. "They have 200 ships in that system. We have nothing nearby. We cannot save them." "We cannot save them," the president agreed, "but we can avenge them." She stood and walked to the center of the chamber. Every eye followed her. Every leader waited for her words. "For 300 years we have been quiet. We have avoided wars. We have accepted insults. We have done everything possible to live in peace with the galaxy." Her voice grew stronger with each sentence. "They mistook our patience for weakness. They mistook our mercy for fear. They thought we were quiet because we had nothing to say." She pressed a button on her console. The hologram of hidden facilities appeared again, but now it was different. Now it showed activation codes running. Now it showed systems coming online across human space. "They were wrong," the president said. "We are quiet because we remember. We remember what we did to each other before we reached the stars. We remember the wars that almost destroyed us. We remember the weapons we built and the horrors we unleashed. We became quiet because we chose to be better, but if they force us to remember what we truly are." She turned to face the military commanders. "Activate Protocol Prometheus." General had waited decades for this order. Part of him had hoped it would never come. But another part of him, a dark and ancient part, felt something like relief. "Yes, Madam President," he said. Deep beneath the surface of Luna, lights flickered on in facilities that had been dark for decades. Machines began to hum. Computers booted up. Systems that had been sleeping since the early days of space travel awakened. On Mars, hidden shipyards opened their doors. Ships emerged that no one in the galaxy had ever seen. They were not like the trading vessels humanity showed the universe. These were weapons, pure, terrible weapons. In the asteroid belt, factories that officially did not exist began producing ammunition. On Europa, training facilities activated and recalled their sleeping soldiers. On Titan, research stations unpacked technologies that humanity had forbidden itself to use. And across human space, a message went out on every frequency. Not just to humans, to everyone, to every species in the galaxy. "This is Admiral of the Terran Retribution Fleet." She was 70 years old. She had retired 15 years ago after a career spent preparing for a war she hoped would never come. Her face was lined, but her eyes were cold and hard as the void itself. "To the Dominion, you have murdered 1.2 million humans. You have enslaved millions more. You have broken every law of civilized warfare. You have committed crimes that cannot be forgiven and cannot be forgotten." She paused. The galaxy held its breath. "The quiet species is done being quiet. We gave you peace. You gave us war. Now we will give you war like you have never imagined. We will not stop until every human slave is free. We will not stop until every murderer is dead. We will not stop until the Dominion understands what they have awakened." On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Admiral watched the message with amusement. An old human woman threatening the might of the Dominion. It was laughable. It was pathetic. "Find their fleet," he ordered. "Destroy it. Then we will take Earth itself." He did not notice the readings on his sensors. He did not see the ships emerging from hiding across human space. He did not understand what 800 human warships meant when they were designed for one purpose: total war. Governor watched the message from her cell on the flagship. She was still wearing her slave collar. She was still surrounded by guards. But for the first time since the bombardment, she smiled. They had pushed too far. Now they would learn why humanity had chosen to be quiet. Now they would learn what the quiet species was capable of. Admiral finished her message with words that would echo through history. "You wanted to see what humans really are. Watch closely. Learn, remember, because after this, no one in the galaxy will ever forget." The war had begun, and humanity intended to finish it. They expected an easy victory. They had conquered 100 species. They knew how wars worked. The weaker side would fight for a while, lose badly, and then surrender. It was simple. It was predictable. It was how the galaxy had always worked. But humanity did not fight like other species. Admiral sent 50 ships to attack the human colony of New Helsinki. It was a small world, barely defended. An easy target. The fleet arrived expecting surrender. Instead, they found mines. Thousands of mines hidden in the asteroid field around the planet. Automated weapons platforms that appeared from nowhere. Defense systems that should not exist for a species so young. 32 ships were destroyed in the first hour. The rest retreated in confusion. On the border world of Prime, alarms screamed in the night. Human ships had appeared in the system, not the small trading vessels the new. These were warships, sleek and deadly, designed for one purpose. They struck the orbital shipyards without warning. They destroyed 100 vessels before they could even power up their engines. Then they vanished, jumping away before reinforcements could arrive. Admiral received report after report of these attacks. Hit and run, strike and fade. The humans were everywhere and nowhere. They did not fight fair. They did not meet thee in open battle. They appeared from the dark, killed, and disappeared. "Cowards," he snarled. "They hide because they know they cannot win a real fight." He was wrong. The humans were not hiding because they were afraid. They were hiding because they were hunting, and Admiral was their prey. The first Terran Retribution fleet gathered in secret at the edge of space. 800 warships, the largest human fleet ever assembled. Admiral stood on the bridge of her flagship, the TNS Remembrance, and studied the star charts. "They have spread their forces across the border," her tactical officer reported. "They are trying to protect all their colonies at once. Their main fleet is scattered." "Good," said. "Then we will teach them the first rule of war. Never divide your forces against an enemy who refuses to play by your rules." She pressed the attack button on her console. The Battle of Sreach lasted 3 days. They had gathered 150 ships to defend the system, one of their most important military bases. They expected to hold easily. They expected the humans to break against their defenses like waves against a rock. Instead, the humans came at them from every direction. They used tactics they had never seen. They coordinated their attacks with perfect timing. They sacrificed small ships to draw fire while their heavy cruisers struck from unexpected angles. They jammed communications. They hacked computer systems. They turned this own technology against them. By the end of the first day, 60 ships were destroyed. By the end of the second day, the number had doubled. On the third day, the remaining tried to retreat. They did not succeed. Admiral escaped on a shuttle, abandoning his crew. He fled toward the inner systems of the Dominion, sending desperate messages to the High Emperor. The humans were coming. The humans could not be stopped. The Dominion needed to unite its full strength before it was too late. But did not escape for long. A small human ship appeared behind him. It was a Spectre vessel carrying a team of Special Forces soldiers. They boarded his shuttle. They killed his guards. They captured him alive. Admiral wanted him alive. She had specific plans for the Butcher of New Geneva. The trial was broadcast across the galaxy. Every species watched. Every empire saw Admiral in chains, forced to answer for his crimes. He had ordered the bombardment of a civilian city. He had murdered 1.2 million innocent people. He had enslaved millions more. He showed no remorse. He laughed at the human judges. He called them prey animals playing at justice. "You cannot kill me," he said. "I am a lord of the Dominion. My people will destroy you for this insult. My death will mean nothing." Admiral looked at him across the courtroom. Her face was calm. Her voice was steady. "You are right," she said. "Your death will mean nothing, but it will feel very, very good." She gave the order. The execution was quick. The galaxy watched die and wondered what kind of species they had awakened. The hegemony had been watching the war with growing concern. They had helped giving them intelligence about human defenses. They had expected both sides to weaken each other. They had expected easy pickings when the fighting was done. Instead, the humans were winning, they were crumbling, and they had made themselves an enemy. "We should strike now," the High Commander decided. "Attack their supply lines, help to crush them. If humanity wins this war, they will come for us next." Warships began raiding human transport vessels. They thought they were being clever. They thought the humans would not notice a few missing ships. They thought they could weaken the enemy without committing to open war. They were wrong. Admiral learned about the attacks within days. She did not respond with anger. She responded with something worse. She sent the Spectres. The Spectre units were humanity's most terrifying soldiers. They were trained in ways that would horrify most species. They could infiltrate any ship. They could kill without being seen. They could capture enemy vessels and turn their crews into puppets. The warship Dominance was on patrol when its sensors detected a human transport vessel. Easy prey. They moved in for the kill. The transport was empty. It was a trap. Spectre soldiers had been hiding in the cargo hold. They boarded the Dominance through airlock after airlock. They killed the officers first, then the crew. They the ship's computers. They dressed in uniforms. When the Dominance returned to space, it looked normal. Its crew reported routine patrols. Its systems showed no problems. They had no idea that their ship was now controlled by humans. Until the Dominance opened fire on the High Command Station. 3 more ships suffered the same fate. The hegemony was in chaos. They could not trust their own vessels. They could not trust their own crews. The humans had turned their strength into their weakness. The Syndicate of and the Ascended Throne of watched these events with growing fear. They had laughed at humanity. They had called them weak. They had expected them to die like all the other small species who the great powers. Now they saw the truth. Humanity was not weak. Humanity had simply been waiting, and now that they were awake, the galaxy would never be the same. "We must act," the Syndicate Council decided. "If we do nothing, the humans will destroy then they will come for us." "We agree," the Ascended Throne declared. "The humans must be stopped, all of us together or none of us at all." For the first time in 1,000 years, the 4 great empires of the Orion Arm united. Syndicate, ancient enemies putting aside their hatred to face a common threat. They gathered their fleets. They combined their armies. They prepared the largest military force the galaxy had ever seen. 12,000 warships, millions of soldiers, the full might of 4 empires. Their target, Earth. Admiral received the intelligence report and smiled. The galaxy was coming to destroy humanity. Every enemy they had, united in one place at one time. "Good," she said. "Now we can finish this." She began preparing humanity's response. The alien empires thought they were coming to end a war. They had no idea they were walking into a trap that humanity had been building for 200 years. The Grand Coalition entered human space like a storm of steel and fire. 12,000 warships from 4 empires, the greatest military force ever assembled. They moved through the outer colonies without stopping, ignoring the small human worlds they passed. They had one target, Earth. Kill the heart and the body would die. Admiral of the commanded the combined fleet. They had wanted the honor, but they had started this war and they would finish it. Was old and experienced, a veteran of 100 campaigns. He knew that this battle would decide the fate of the galaxy. The humans are gathering their ships at Sol, his intelligence officer reported. Our scouts count approximately 1,000 vessels. They are outnumbered 12-1. Nodded, these were good odds. The humans had fought well, but they could not overcome numbers like these. No species could. Set course for Earth, he commanded. Maximum speed, we end this today. The Coalition fleet burned toward Sol. They crossed the void in formation, proud banners flying from their flagships. The Syndicate, the 4 empires that had fought each other for centuries, now united to destroy a common enemy. They reached the edge of the solar system and stopped. Something was wrong. Admiral, the sensor officer said, his voice was shaking. I am reading energy signatures throughout the system, thousands of them, hidden in the asteroid belt, hidden near the planets, hidden in the void itself. Stared at the display. The readings made no sense. The humans only had 1,000 ships. That was confirmed intelligence. But the sensors were showing weapons platforms everywhere, defense stations, automated turrets, things that should not exist. What is this? He demanded. Sir, I believe the humans have been building defenses for a very long time. I believe they have been hiding them from us. Admiral watched the Coalition fleet from her flagship. She was in the heart of the Aegis, humanity's greatest secret. For 200 years, they had prepared for this moment. They had built weapons and hidden them. They had created defense networks that could turn the entire solar system into a death trap. They had done it quietly, patiently, waiting for the day when the galaxy would come for them. That day had arrived. All stations report ready, her tactical officer announced. The Aegis is at full power. Sol is locked down. Nodded, she felt no joy. She felt no excitement. She only felt the weight of what was about to happen. Millions of beings were about to die. Some of them were monsters who deserved death, but most of them were just soldiers following orders, fighting for empires that had lied to them. It did not matter. They had come to destroy Earth. They had come to end humanity. They would receive no mercy. Open fire, she said. The Battle of Sol began with a wall of death. Platforms hidden in the asteroid belt activated simultaneously. Thousands of projectiles, each traveling at a fraction of the speed of light, slammed into the Coalition fleet. Ships exploded before they could raise shields. Cruisers vanished in balls of flame. The first wave of attackers died before they understood what was happening. The Coalition fleet scattered, trying to find cover in a system that had no cover. Every rock, every moon, every piece of debris hid another weapon. The humans had spent centuries turning Sol into a fortress. Now the aliens understood why. All ships advance, Admiral screamed. Push through the defenses, we have the numbers, we can win this. He was right about the numbers. He was wrong about winning. The Coalition pressed forward, losing ships with every kilometer. They reached the orbit of Mars and found a wall of human warships waiting for them. The Terran Retribution fleet, reinforced by every vessel humanity could spare. They did not run. They did not hide. They met the enemy head-on. Admiral led the charge personally. Her flagship, the TNS Remembrance, cut through the enemy formation like a knife. She had spent her entire life preparing for this battle. She knew every tactic, every weakness, every flaw in alien technology. She exploited them all. The battle lasted 72 hours, 3 days of continuous combat. Ships burned and died across the solar system. Debris fields grew so thick that navigation became impossible. The void was filled with the screams of the dying and the silence of the dead. The lost half their fleet on the first day. They tried to retreat on the second day and found human ships blocking their escape. The syndicate broke formation and ran, only to fly directly into a minefield. The proud and ancient fought to the last ship before finally accepting defeat. When the guns finally fell silent, 8,000 coalition ships were destroyed. The remaining 4,000 surrendered or fled. The Grand Coalition, the greatest military force in galactic history, had been broken. But humanity did not celebrate. They did not rest. They had won the battle for Saul. Now they would win the war. Admiral gave the order for Operation Prometheus Rising. "We go on the offensive," she announced to her captains. "Every empire, every system, every target of value, they came to our home to destroy us. Now we go to theirs." Human fleets spread across the galaxy like a wildfire. They did not target military bases this time. They targeted infrastructure, shipyards that built warships, factories that produced weapons, communication hubs that coordinated defense. They struck at the things that made empires function. They watched in horror as human ships appeared in orbit. They expected bombardment. They expected the same destruction they had brought to New Geneva. Instead, the humans destroyed only the orbital stations. They left the planet untouched. "We are not you," Admiral broadcast to the terrified population below. "We do not murder civilians, but your empire's ability to make war ends today." On Prime, human soldiers landed in the capital city. They walked through streets filled with panicking aliens, weapons ready but not firing. They went directly to the Hall of Command, where the leaders had gathered. The Spectre units did not negotiate. They did not make demands. They simply appeared inside the secured building, bypassing every defense, and killed every war leader who had voted to attack humanity. Then they left. The message was clear. No one who started this war would survive it. The Syndicate's ruling council tried to flee. They loaded their wealth onto transport ships and headed for the outer systems, hopping to escape justice. Human interceptors found them 3 days later. The transports were captured. The council members were arrested. Their trials would come later. The Ascended Throne have made their last stand at the Temple of Eternity, their most sacred place. They had ruled the stars for 10,000 years. Their sacred fleet had never been defeated. They gathered their remaining ships around the temple, prepared to die with honor. Admiral gave them one chance. "Surrender," she said. "Your empire is finished. Your fleet is broken. Your allies have abandoned you. Surrender now and your people will live. Fight and you will die, all of you." The Admiral stared at the human woman on his. She was small. She was old. She was from a species that had existed for the blink of an eye compared to and she had defeated everything his people had built. "Why should we trust you?" he asked. "You could destroy us anyway." "I could," agreed, "but I will not. We did not start this war. We did not want this war. We only want it to end. Surrender and it ends today." The Admiral was silent for a long moment. Then he gave the order. The sacred fleet powered down its weapons. For the first time in 10,000 years, they surrendered. Across the galaxy, the other empires followed. The Dominion collapsed. The hegemony sued for peace. The Syndicate accepted whatever terms humanity demanded. The war was over. Admiral sat alone in her quarters after the final surrender. She was exhausted. She had not slept properly in months. She had sent thousands of her people to their deaths. She had killed millions of enemies. She did not feel like a hero. She felt like a tired old woman who had done terrible things because they were necessary. A message arrived from Earth. President Wei asking to return home. There would be celebrations. There would be honors. There would be a future to build. Looked at the stars outside her window. So many of them belonged to humanity now. so many worlds that would never again threaten Earth. Was it worth it? She asked herself. She thought of New Geneva. She thought of the 1.2 million who had died. She thought of the slaves who had been freed and the murderers who had been punished. It had to be, she decided, because now it is finished, now we can have peace. She began the long journey home, hoping that she was right. 5 years had passed since the war ended. The galaxy was a different place now. The Great Hall on Earth was filled with diplomats from 100 worlds. They had gathered to witness the signing of the final treaty, the document that would shape galactic civilization for generations to come. Humans stood among aliens who had once called them weak. Survivors sat beside representatives. Syndicate merchants negotiated with priests. The old order was dead. Something new was being born. President Wei stepped to the podium. She was older now, her hair streaked with, but her voice was still strong. 5 years ago, we were attacked without warning. Our colonies were bombed. Our people were enslaved. We were told that we were too small, too quiet, too weak to matter. We were told that our species would be erased from history. She paused and looked at the alien delegations. Some of them could not meet her eyes. We did not want war. We never wanted war. For 300 years, we avoided conflicts because we knew what we were capable of. We knew the darkness that lives inside humanity. We had seen it in our own history, in the wars we fought against ourselves before we reached the stars. We chose peace because we were afraid of what we would become if we chose war. The hall was silent. Every being waited for her next words. The Dominion forced our hand. The hegemony supported them. The Syndicate and the Ascended Throne joined the attack. You all came to destroy us. You all learned the same lesson. She held up the treaty, a thick document that had taken years to negotiate. This treaty is not punishment. It is not revenge. It is a promise. We promise to protect the innocent. We promise to never allow slavery in any territory we can reach. We promise to defend those who cannot defend themselves. And we promise that if anyone threatens the peace we have built, they will face the same fate as the empires that attacked us. She signed her name. One by one, the alien leaders came forward and added their marks. The Geneva Accords of 2352 became law. Admiral watched the ceremony from the back of the hall. She had refused the invitation to sit at the front. She had refused every honor the government tried to give her. She did not feel like a hero. She felt like a butcher who had done what was necessary. After the signing, President found her standing alone by a window. "You should be up there," the president said. "None of this would exist without you." "Millions died because of me," replied. "I gave the orders, I sent the ships, I made the decisions. Their blood is on my hands. And millions more would have died if you had not acted. New Geneva was just the beginning, the plan to enslave our entire species. You stopped them." Was quiet for a moment. Outside the window she could see children playing in a park. Human children, laughing and running without fear. That was what she had fought for. That was what her soldiers had died for. "Maybe," she said finally, "but I am tired of war. I am tired of death. I am going home and I am never coming back." The president nodded. She understood. Some wounds did not heal. "Thank you for everything." Shook her hand and walked away. She retired to a small house on a quiet colony world, far from Earth, far from politics, far from memories of the war. She spent her remaining years growing vegetables and watching the stars. She never gave another interview. She never wrote her memoirs. She never spoke about what she had done. But every year on the anniversary of the Battle of Saul, she would raise a glass to the men and women who had served with her. The ones who came home, the ones who did not. Across the galaxy, the former empires rebuilt. It was slow and painful work. The Dominion had collapsed completely. Their worlds were now independent, governed by species they had once enslaved. Some of them were grateful to humanity. Some of them were angry. Some of them were still trying to figure out what freedom meant. The hegemony survived, but barely. Their government had been purged of war criminals. Their military had been reduced to a fraction of its former size. They were no longer a great power. They were just another species, trying to find their place in a galaxy that no longer feared them. The syndicate adapted. They had always been merchants and traders. They shifted their business from weapons and slaves to legitimate goods. They were still rich. They were still powerful, but they were careful now, very careful. The ascended throne of took the longest to recover. Their pride had been their identity for 10,000 years. Losing the war had shattered that identity. But slowly, generation by generation, they learned to find meaning in something other than conquest. They became scholars and artists, preserving the history of the galaxy. They never forgot what they had been. They never stopped being ashamed. Governor Sarah of New Geneva lived to see her world rebuilt. The capital city rose from the ashes, beautiful and modern, with a memorial at its heart. The memorial listed every name of every person who had died in the bombardment. 1.2 million names, carved in stone that would last forever. She visited the memorial every year on the anniversary. She would stand before the wall of names and remember. She would remember the fear. She would remember the fire. She would remember the sound of children screaming and parents crying and soldiers dying. She would remember that it had almost broken her, and she would remember that it had not. On the 10th anniversary of the war's end, a young student named traveled to New Geneva. She was born after the war, raised in a world that no longer had an empire. Her teachers had told her about the bombardment. Her parents had apologized for what their people had done, but she wanted to understand. She found an old human professor at the memorial, a man who had lost his family in the attack. She was afraid to approach him, afraid he would hate her for what her species had done. Instead, he smiled at her. "You are young," he said. "You were not responsible." "My people were responsible," she replied. "How can you not hate us?" The professor thought about this for a long moment. Then he gestured at the rebuilt city around them. "We could have destroyed you," he said. "After the war, we had the power to wipe them from existence. Every ship, every world, every person. We could have done to you what you tried to do to us. Why did you not? Because that is not who we want to be. We fought the war because we had to. We ended the war as quickly as we could, and then we chose to build instead of destroy." He looked at the young with something like hope. "Your generation will not make the same mistakes. Your generation will remember what war costs. And maybe, in another 100 years, no one will remember the war at all. They will just remember the peace that came after." Returned to her and became a historian. She dedicated her life to teaching young about the war, about the mistakes their ancestors had made, about the humans who had shown mercy when they had every reason not to. Her most famous book included a chapter about why humanity had spared the. She interviewed dozens of human leaders and soldiers, trying to understand their thinking. The answer she found surprised her. "They did not spare us because they were weak," she wrote. "They spared us because they were strong. They were strong enough to stop when the fighting was done. They were strong enough to choose peace over revenge. They were strong enough to be better than us." A saying spread across the galaxy in the decades after the war. Species who had once mocked humanity now spoke it in whispers. Leaders who had once dreamed of conquest remembered it before making decisions. Children learned it in schools across 1,000 worlds. Let the humans sleep. It was a warning and a prayer. It meant that humanity was dangerous beyond measure, but only when awakened. It meant that peace with humans was not just possible but preferable. It meant that the quiet species was quiet by choice, and wise beings did not force them to choose otherwise. On Earth, life returned to normal. Children played in parks. Workers built new colonies. Families gathered for meals and talked about ordinary things. The war became history, then legend, then something children learned about in school and promptly forgot. But in the deep places, in the hidden shipyards and secret facilities, humanity continued to prepare. They did not dismantle the Aegis. They did not destroy their weapons. They simply put them back to sleep, ready to awaken again if needed. Because they had learned the same lesson the galaxy had learned. Peace was precious. Peace required vigilance, and peace sometimes required the willingness to fight. Admiral died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 93. Her last words were to the caretaker who had looked after her in her final years. "Was it worth it?" the caretaker asked. Looked at the stars outside her window one last time. She thought of the children playing in the park on the day of the treaty signing. She thought of New Geneva, rebuilt and beautiful. She thought of the galaxy, at peace for the first time in centuries. "It was necessary," she said, "and necessity is its own justification." She closed her eyes. The quiet species returned to its silence. And the galaxy let them sleep.